3 days before Thanksgiving, my son called and said 7 words that erased everything I believed about being a father. Don't come home, my wife doesn't want you here. I spent the holiday alone in a restaurant, staring at a plate of food I couldn't taste, until a quiet elderly woman walked up and asked if I wanted to join her family. I said yes, thinking it was just kindness, but I had no idea my life was about to split in two. 5 years later, my son stood in front of me screaming, and only then did I understand what that invitation had truly set in motion. The phone didn't just ring, it screamed. 7 p.m. Tuesday. The sound cut through the silence of my apartment like a fire alarm in an empty warehouse. I flinched, dropping the blue Oxford shirt I was folding. It landed in the open suitcase on my bed, slightly crooked. I hated crooked. I was a structural engineer for 30 years. I built things that stood up to wind, weight, and time. I lived by measurements. I lived by plans. And this suitcase was the final step of the biggest plan I had ever made. I reached for the phone. My hand was steady, but my chest felt tight. Brad, the screen read. My son. A smile cracked my face, unexpected and warm. I hadn't heard his voice in a week. I slid the green button over. I was ready to give him the ETA. I was ready to tell him the house here was sold. The money was wired, and his father was coming home to Chicago to help him raise my grandson. Hey, kiddo, I said. I'm all packed. Just need to print the boarding pass. I waited for the warmth. I waited for the relief in his voice. Silence, not the quiet of a paused conversation. This was a heavy, static silence, the kind of silence you hear before a building gives way. Don't come, Dad. The voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the boy I taught to ride a bike. It was cold, metallic, clipped. I froze. My fingers gripped the sleek black plastic of the phone. What? Don't come to Chicago, he repeated. The words were precise, rehearsed. Jessica doesn't think it's a good idea. 7 words. They hit me harder than a physical blow. I looked down at the vintage watch wrapped in blue paper on the bed, a gift for my grandson. I looked at the neatly stacked shirts. Brad, I stammered, my engineer's brain trying to fix a problem that wasn't mechanical. I have the ticket. I have the gifts. I sold the house, Brad. I sold everything to be ready to help you. We need space, he snapped. There was no sadness in his tone. There was only annoyance. He sounded like I was a telemarketer trying to sell him insurance during dinner. He sounded like I was a burden he had already put down. My eyes darted around my empty bedroom. The walls were bare. The photos were packed. I had dismantled my entire life for this move. Is this about the money? I asked. My voice shook, betraying the calm I tried to project. The memory flashed in my mind. Months ago, the demand. Not a request. A demand. $75,000. Dad, you have $320,000 coming from the house sale. You don't need that much to retire. I had told him no. I had told him that money was my safety net. It was the foundation of my remaining years. Now, on the phone, he let out a long, loud sigh, the sound of a man dealing with a stubborn child. Just, don't come, Arthur. The name hung in the air. Arthur. He didn't call me Dad. He demoted me. In one word, he stripped away 56 years of history. Happy Thanksgiving, he muttered. Click. The line went dead. I stood there. The apartment was completely silent now. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was violent. It pressed against my ears. I looked at the suitcase. It looked like a coffin for a life that didn't happen. I sat on the edge of the mattress. My chest throbbed. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the sensation of a load-bearing wall snapping. I was 56 years old. I had sold my home. I had packed my life. I had prepared to be a full-time father and grandfather, and my son had just fired me. I stared at the blank wall. I calculated the variables. I analyzed the data. The conclusion was inescapable. I was completely, utterly alone. 3 days later, on Thanksgiving Day, Denver wasn't white and crisp like the postcards. It was gray. Wet snow hit the windshield of my sedan like shrapnel, smearing into dirty slush before the wipers could clear it. I couldn't stay in the apartment. The silence there had density now. It pressed against the windows. It sat on the unpacked boxes. It felt like walking through a condemned building where the support beams were already groaning. I drove. I didn't have a destination. I just needed motion. I ended up at Sal's Diner on the edge of town. A neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. I walked in. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of roasted turkey, sage, and burnt coffee. It hit my stomach like a fist. I wasn't hungry, I was hollow. The place was packed. Families, fathers in flannel shirts carving meat, mothers wiping gravy from chins, the cacophony of laughter and clinking silverware. It was a structural integrity I didn't possess anymore. They were solid, I was fracturing. I found a booth in the back, deep in the shadows near the kitchen swing door. I sat with my back to the wall, a habit from job sites. Always watch the perimeter. Just coffee, I told the waitress. Black. She looked at me for a second too long, her eyes scanning the empty seat across from me. Sure, hun. My phone sat on the Formica table. The screen was black. I stared at it. I was a rational man. I dealt in physics, in concrete and steel, but for 3 days I had been bargaining with the universe. Call me, I thought. Tell me it was a mistake. Tell me you were just stressed. Tell me to come home. The phone buzzed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed it, my thumb hovering over the unlocked screen. It wasn't Brad. Julianne, my neighbor back in Chicago, a retired school teacher. Sharp eyes. She noticed things others missed. A cracking foundation, a leaking pipe, a changing mood. I opened the text. Arthur, I saw Brad at the bank today. I frowned. My fingers tapped out a slow response. So. The 3 dots of her typing bubble pulsed. It took too long. He was yelling, Arthur, at the teller. I stared at the words. Brad didn't yell. Brad was passive. Brad avoided conflict. He was trying to cash a check, she wrote. My stomach turned over. What check? A check with your name on it? The world seemed to tilt. The noise of the diner, the laughing families, the clattering plates faded into a dull roar. The teller tore it up, Julianne added. But Arthur, he looked desperate. He looked scared. I put the phone down. My hand was shaking. I hid it under the table. He hadn't just rejected me. He hadn't just asked for space. He had tried to access the account. He had tried to cash a check I never wrote. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a perimeter breach. Are you alone? The voice was soft but firm. It startled me. I looked up. An elderly woman stood at the edge of my booth. She had silver hair pulled back tight and eyes that didn't flinch. She stood tall, her posture rigid like a steel column. Martha Higgins. I didn't know her name yet, but I saw her strength immediately. I nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed tight. Come sit with us, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, I managed to croak. She pointed a finger at a large round table in the center of the room. We have too much food, and my husband tells terrible jokes. We need a buffer. I really shouldn't. Arthur, she said. She didn't know my name, but she used the tone my mother used to use. Nobody eats alone today. Not on my watch. I looked at her. Then I looked at the phone on the table. The black screen hid the betrayal waiting in my text messages. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I followed her to the large table. A giant of a man stood up as we approached. George Higgins. His hands were the size of shovels, calloused and scarred. He looked like he had built half the city with his bare hands. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask why I was alone. He just kicked a chair out with his boot. Dark meat or light? George rumbled. Light, I whispered. Good man. He dropped a slab of turkey onto a plate and shoved it toward me. Their son, Mike, poured iced tea into a glass without breaking his conversation. And then the baby Leo reached out from his high chair. He grabbed my finger. His grip was tight, warm, alive. I looked down at that tiny hand wrapped around my index finger. For 3 days I had been a wallet. I had been a target. I had been a ghost. But to this baby, I was just something to hold on to. The dam broke. I didn't sob. I didn't wail. I just sat there, staring at the baby's hand, while hot tears rolled down my face and dripped into my mashed potatoes. The table went quiet, but it wasn't the awkward silence of the phone call. It was a respectful silence, a sheltering silence. Martha reached over and covered my other hand with hers. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was iron. It's his loss, Arthur, she whispered. I looked up, startled. I hadn't told her anything. She looked right into me. She saw the suitcase in my eyes. She saw the son, who wasn't there. It's his loss, she repeated. That night, amidst the wreckage of my own life, the foundation of a new one was poured. They didn't just feed me. They invited me back for Sunday dinner. Every Sunday, Martha had said. It's a non-negotiable clause. I showed up, and then I showed up the next Sunday, and the one after that. 6 months passed. My life, which had collapsed in November, was being rebuilt. I approached it like a renovation project. You strip the rot. You reinforce the beams. You pour new concrete. I became a fixture in the Higgins household. I wasn't just a guest, I was part of the infrastructure. I had a designated drawer in their guest room dresser, 3 shirts, fresh socks, a spare toothbrush. It was a small space, but it meant more to me than the deed to my old house. One afternoon in April, I was in the backyard with George. The spring air was crisp, smelling of wet earth and thawing mud. We were fixing the fence that bordered the alley. George handed me a cedar plank. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. We communicated in measurements and tools. I ran my hand along the old post. The wood was soft, spongy. Termites? George asked, squinting against the sun. Water damage? I said, pressing my thumb into the wood. It gave way easily. It looks solid from the street, George, but the core is gone. If a strong wind hits this, it snaps. I stopped. The words hung there. It looks solid from the street, but the core is gone. I wasn't talking about the fence anymore. I was talking about the relationship I had spent 30 years building with Brad. I had painted it. I had maintained it. I had thrown money at it. But the rot had been there for a long time. George looked at me. He saw the shadow cross my face. He took the rotted wood from my hand and tossed it onto the scrap pile. Then we replace it, George rumbled. We dig it out. We pour deeper footings. We build it right. We worked in silence for the next hour. The rhythm of the hammer, the smell of sawdust, the physical ache in my shoulders. It was medicine. It was better than any pill Dr. Evans could prescribe. I was healing. Later that week, my phone rang. It wasn't the jagged ring that used to make my heart jump. It was a soft chime. Hey, Dad. It was Sarah, calling from Seattle. My daughter, the one who didn't ask for money. The one who just wanted to know if I was eating enough vegetables. Hi, honey, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. You sound different, she said. There was a pause on the line. You sound lighter. I looked out the window. The snow was gone. The trees were budding. I am, I told her. And it was the truth. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring, Sarah. I stopped auditing the past. I'm glad, she whispered. I was worried about you. After Thanksgiving, I thought you'd break. I almost did, I admitted, but I found a new foundation. But peace is fragile. It has a way of making you drop your guard. 2 weeks later, I went for my annual checkup. Dr. Evans was a man who didn't believe in small talk. He treated the human body like a machine that needed regular servicing. His office smelled of rubbing alcohol and latex. He wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. The Velcro ripped loud in the quiet room. He pumped the bulb. Whoosh! Whoosh! I watched the mercury fall. He took the stethoscope out of his ears and frowned. He looked at my chart, then at me. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly on his tie. Arthur, he said, your numbers are down, way down. Good, I said. I've been active, working with my hands. It is good, Dr. Evans said. But he didn't smile. He leaned forward, his elbows on the metal table. But stress leaves scars on the heart, Arthur. Real physical scars. You were running at a red line for years. He tapped the file with his pen. Whatever you cut out of your life, whatever stressor you removed, keep it out. The room felt suddenly cold. The air conditioner hummed. If you let the poison back in, he warned, his eyes locking onto mine, it will kill you. Your heart can't take another shock like the last one. I nodded slowly. The medical term was hypertension. The real term was heartbreak. I knew exactly who the poison was. I walked out of the clinic into the bright sunlight. I felt strong. I felt safe. I felt like the fortress I had built was impenetrable. I was wrong. May arrived with a deceptive gentleness. The air in Denver turned sweet, smelling of lilac and freshly cut grass. I was in the Higgins garage, a space that had become my sanctuary. It smelled of sawdust, oil, and old metal, the perfume of honest work. I was refinishing an oak chair for Martha, carefully sanding down layers of old varnish to reveal the grain beneath. Grit 22, smooth, consistent, my hand moved in rhythmic circles. My breathing was slow. My blood pressure was 120/80. I was a structural component that had been re-rated for a lighter load. Then the vibration started. My phone was sitting on the workbench next to a tin of wood stain. It buzzed against the wood. a jarring, aggressive rattle that cut through the calm like a circular saw hitting a nail. I stopped sanding. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. I wiped my hands on a rag, taking my time. I didn't want to look. I knew with a sinking dread in my gut that the peace I had built was about to be tested. I picked it up. Brad. The name on the screen wasn't just a word. It was a stress test. I hadn't heard from him in 6 months. Not since the dial tone on Thanksgiving. Not since the torn-up check. My thumb hovered over the red button. Decline, my brain said. Protect the structure. But the heart is a treacherous organ. It remembers the small hand holding yours crossing the street. It remembers the first bike ride. It overrides the engineer's logic. I slid the green button. Hello. My voice was flat, neutral. I braced myself for the anger, for the demand. Hey, Dad. The air left the garage. He didn't sound angry. He sounded broken. His voice was thin, reedy, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. I could hear the wet catch of breath in his throat. Brad? I'm sorry, he wept. The sound was raw. I'm so sorry, Dad. I've been a mess. I leaned against the workbench. The sturdy oak pressed into my lower back. What happened? I miss you, he choked out. I made a mistake keeping you away. Jessica, we were just so stressed. But I can't do this without my dad. He was crying openly now. It was a sound I hadn't heard since he was 10 years old and broke his arm falling out of the treehouse I built him. I want to fix this, he said. I want to come see you. I want to fly to Denver. I closed my eyes. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. Sudden contact after prolonged silence usually indicates a resource failure. My engineer's brain whispered, check the variables. But then he said it. I just want to see my dad. The bait was perfect. It was baited with the one thing I couldn't buy, couldn't build, and couldn't sand down. Okay, I said. The word was soft, surrendering. Come. Tuesday, he said, too quickly. I can be there Tuesday. Okay, Tuesday. We hung up. The silence rushed back into the garage. But it felt different now. It felt charged, unstable. I stood there for a long time staring at the phone. Was I a father being reconciled? Or was I a mark being softened? I walked out to the backyard. George was there, repairing a section of the lattice under the deck. He was a man who understood leverage and load. Brad called, I said. George didn't look up. He drove a screw into the wood. Whir, thunk, and George asked. He's coming to visit Tuesday. George stopped. He slowly set the drill down on the grass. He stood up, wiping his massive hands on his jeans. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing under his bushy brows. He was crying, I added, feeling the need to defend the decision. He said he missed me. George didn't smile. He didn't offer a platitude. He picked up a crowbar, weighing it in his hand. 6 months of silence, George rumbled. His voice was low, vibrating in his chest. 6 months of don't come. 6 months of you're dead to me. He looked at the fence we had fixed. Structural rot doesn't heal itself overnight, Arthur. And people don't change their nature because the calendar flipped. He's my son, George. I know, George said. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. And that's why you're blind. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Be careful, Arthur. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Watch your heart. But mostly, watch your wallet. The words hung in the spring air, heavy and true. I wanted to be angry at George for his cynicism. But deep down, in the part of me that calculated risk for a living, I knew he was right. The stress was back. The poison was leaking in. Monday, the day before arrival. I was in my apartment, standing in the guest room. I had spent the morning cleaning. I vacuumed the carpet until the lines were perfectly straight. I dusted the blinds. I put fresh sheets on the bed, crisp white cotton that smelled of lavender detergent. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted the structure to hold. I placed a glass of water on the nightstand. I adjusted the blinds to let in just enough light. He's coming back, I told myself. He's realized his mistake. He needs his father. But George's voice was still echoing in my head. Watch your wallet. My phone rang. It wasn't Brad. It was an unknown number. I usually ignored these. Spam. Robots. People selling things I didn't need. But today my nerves were raw. I answered. Arthur Miller? The voice was gravelly. Low, familiar, but from a different life. Yes, this is Elias Thorne. I froze. I knew the name. Elias was a private investigator back in Chicago. We had worked together years ago when I needed background checks on contractors for a big high-rise project. He was a man who lived in the shadows. He didn't make social calls. Elias? I leaned against the doorframe. My heart did a slow, heavy thump. Is everything okay? No, Arthur, it isn't. The line crackled. He sounded tired. He sounded like a man who was about to kick a dog he liked. I shouldn't be telling you this, Elias said. Client confidentiality and all that. But I saw a name cross my desk this morning. A file came in from associate. What file? A debt collection file, Arthur. The room went cold. The smell of lavender seemed to turn sour. Your son, Elias said. Brad. He isn't coming to Denver for a reunion. I gripped the phone tight. What do you mean? He's coming for a bailout, Artie. He's in deep. How deep? 75,000. Minimum? The number hit me like a physical slap. The exact number he had demanded 6 months ago. The exact amount he said I didn't need. Gambling? I whispered. Sports betting. High stakes, Elias said. He's into some bad people, Arthur. Bookies. The kind who don't send letters. They send guys in leather jackets. I walked over to the bed I had just made. I sat down on the perfect white sheets. I ruined the straight lines. He's desperate, Elias continued. The word on the street is he told them his rich father was going to cover it. He bought himself 2 weeks by using your name. That time is up on Friday. Friday. He wasn't coming to see me. He was on a deadline. He's running, Arthur. He's not visiting. He's hiding. Thanks, Elias, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. Don't give him a dime, Elias warned. If you pay them once, they'll never stop. They'll bleed you dry. I know. I hung up. I sat there in the silence of the guest room. The afternoon sun hit the dust motes dancing in the air. 10 minutes ago, those dust motes looked like hope. Now, they looked like debris. I looked at the pillow I had fluffed. I looked at the glass of water. It was all a stage set. A lie. The grief washed over me, hot and stinging. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the lamp against the wall. I wanted to be the father who could just hug his son and make the bad men go away. But I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a structural engineer, and I had just spotted a critical failure in the blueprints. I stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles on the bed, but not out of love, out of precision. The tears dried up. The shaking in my hands stopped. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. The hopeful father had died in that room. The strategist was born. I walked out of the guest room and closed the door. Let him come, I thought. I'm ready. I chose the meeting place carefully. The roastery on 16th Street. It was open, public, and loud. The hiss of espresso machines and the clatter of ceramic on marble provided a sonic shield. I arrived 20 minutes early. I took a table in the back corner, facing the entrance. Control the perimeter, I thought. Secure the sightlines. I wasn't meeting my son. I was meeting a variable. I ordered a black coffee. It sat steaming in front of me, untouched. I watched the door. Every time the bell chimed, my stomach tightened, not with excitement, but with a nausea that sat heavy in my throat. Then he walked in. Brad. My breath hitched. The image I had held in my mind for 6 months, the vibrant, arrogant young man, shattered. He looked terrible. He was thinner, his suit jacket hanging loose around the shoulders like it belonged to a bigger man. His hair, usually gelled and precise, was dull. There was gray at his temples that hadn't been there at Christmas. He scanned the room. His eyes were darting, restless. He wasn't looking for a father. He was checking for exits. He saw me. A smile plastered onto his face. It was too wide, too quick. A structural facade meant to hide the cracks. Dad, he crossed the room. I stood up. He hugged me. It felt wrong, stiff. There was no warmth in it, only tension. I could feel the tremors in his arms. He smelled of stale airplane air and mints eaten to cover the scent of cigarettes. You look good, Dad, he lied. His voice was high, tight. You look tired, Brad, I said, pulling away. I didn't let go of his arms immediately. I held him at a distance, inspecting the damage. We sat down. He didn't order anything. He just kept his hands wrapped around a glass of water, his knuckles white. So, he started, clearing his throat. Denver, it's nice, different. It's quiet, I said. Peaceful. He flinched at the word. Yeah, peace is good. He laughed. A dry, cracking sound. We could use some peace in Chicago. Here it comes. The narrative. How is Jessica? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I sipped my coffee. It was bitter. She's good. Stressed. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Her dad, you know? He pulled his funding from the business. Just like that. Left us high and dry. He spun the tale. The market had turned. The suppliers were gouging him. He was a victim of circumstance. A brilliant businessman, undone by bad luck and betrayal. I listened. I watched his mouth move. I watched the way he couldn't make eye contact for more than 2 seconds. Lie. Lie. Deflection. Lie. I didn't need a polygraph. I had Elias's file in my head. Gambling. Bookies. 75,000. That sounds hard, Brad, I said. It was the only thing I could offer. It is, he said, seizing on the sympathy. I've been trying to keep it together, Dad, but I'm drowning. I just need some time, and maybe a little help to get back on my feet. He was setting the footings for the ask. He was pouring the concrete for the guilt trip. But then his eyes drifted. He looked over my shoulder, out the large plate glass window that faced the street. His face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast I thought he might faint. I didn't turn around immediately. I watched his reaction. Fear. Pure, unadulterated terror. Brad, he didn't hear me. He was staring at something across the street. I turned slowly, casually, as if looking for a waiter. Across the street, leaning against a brick wall, was a man. He was wearing a black leather jacket, despite the warm May sun. He was smoking a cigarette, his eyes fixed on the coffee shop window. He wasn't looking at the traffic. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking right at Brad, Marcus. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew his function. He was the enforcement. He was the deadline. The man took a long drag, exhaled a cloud of gray smoke, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. My blood ran cold. Brad hadn't just come to visit. He hadn't just come to borrow money. He had been escorted. He was on a leash, and the man across the street was holding the chain. If Brad didn't walk out of here with a check, he wasn't going to walk away at all. I turned back to my son. He was shaking now, visibly shaking. The water in his glass rippled. Is everything okay? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Brad snapped his attention back to me. His eyes were wide, wet. Yeah, he stammered. Yeah, I thought I saw someone I knew. You seem distracted. I'm just so happy to see you, Dad. It was the most painful lie of them all. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His palm was sweaty. I missed you so much, he whispered. I looked at his hand. I looked at the desperation in his eyes. I looked at the shadow of the man across the street reflecting in the window. I felt a crack in my own chest, a hairline fracture running right through the heart. He didn't miss me. He missed my bank account. He was a drowning man trying to climb onto my shoulders, not caring if he pushed me under to save himself. I'm sure you'll figure it out, Brad, I said, pulling my hand back. You're smart. His jaw tightened. The panic flared behind his eyes. I don't know if I can do it alone, Dad. We'll see, I said. I stood up. Let's go. You must be tired. I walked him to his rental car. The man across the street watched us. I felt his eyes on my back like a laser sight. I drove home feeling heavy, heavier than I had felt in months. The explosion wasn't just coming. The fuse was already burning, and I knew with a sickening certainty that I was the only one who could stop it. But the cost would be everything I had left. The week passed in a suffocating blur. Brad stayed in the guest room. He slept late. When he was awake, he paced. I could hear him through the wall. Step, turn, like a caged animal testing the bars. I played the part. I made breakfast. I asked about the weather in Chicago. I asked about Jessica. He lied. I nodded. It was a dance of ghosts. He was pretending to be a son. I was pretending not to know he was a casualty. Thursday night, the tension in the apartment was toxic. The air felt pressurized, like the cabin of a plane before a crash. Brad checked his phone every 30 seconds. His leg bounced under the dinner table, shaking the plates. You okay? I asked, cutting a piece of steak. Fine, he snapped. Then he forced a smile, a grotesque showing of teeth. Just work stuff. Jessica's dad again. Right, I said. The business. Friday morning arrived. The deadline. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee. The sun was hitting the granite countertop, but it offered no warmth. Brad walked in. He wasn't wearing his pajamas. He was dressed, suit pants, white shirt. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask for coffee. "We're out of time," he said. His voice wasn't weak anymore, it was cornered. I set the mug down. "What do you mean?" "I need that money, Dad," he said. He took a step toward me. "I need $75,000. Today? By noon." The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. There was no more "I miss you." There was no more "I'm sorry." There was only the raw, ugly need of an addict. "I can't do that, Brad," I said. My voice was steady, anchored by the knowledge Elias had given me. "Don't give me that," he shouted. Spit flew from his lips. "You have the money. You sold the house. I know you have $320,000 sitting in that account." He slammed his hand on the counter. The coffee in my mug rippled. "You're sitting on a fortune while your son is drowning," he screamed. "And for what? To play house with those farmers?" He knew. "I saw the photos on the fridge," he spat. "The old couple, the baby. You're choosing strangers over your own blood?" I looked at him. I saw the fear behind the rage. He was terrified of the man in the leather jacket. He was terrified of the consequences of his own actions. "I'm not choosing them over you," I said quietly. "I'm choosing not to destroy myself to enable you. Enable me. I'm losing my business." "Stop it, Brad," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. "I know about the bookies." The kitchen went dead silent. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside. Brad froze. His face went gray. "I know about the gambling," I continued. "I know about the $75,000. I know about the deadline today." He stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. "Who told you?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter," I said. "Throwing my retirement money into a black hole won't save you, Brad. It will just buy you another month. And then what? You'll be back, and I'll be broke." I looked him in the eye. "I love you, but I won't pay for your destruction." He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He realized the manipulation hadn't worked. He realized the bank was closed. His face twisted. It wasn't sadness. It was pure, distilled hatred. "You're dead to me," he said. The words were quiet, precise. They were meant to kill. "For real this time," he hissed. "Don't ever contact me. Don't call. Don't write. As far as I'm concerned, you died in that apartment in Chicago." He turned around. He walked to the guest room. I heard the zipper of the suitcase. Zip. Zip. Minutes later, he walked out. He didn't look at me. He opened the front door. "Happy retirement, Arthur," he muttered. Slam. The door shook in its frame. I stood in the silence. My heart was hammering, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I was still standing. The structure had held. I didn't chase him. I didn't call him back. I grabbed my keys. I needed to be somewhere safe. I needed to be somewhere real. I drove to the Higgins house. George was in the driveway, washing his truck. He saw my car pull up. He saw my face. He dropped the sponge. I got out of the car. I walked up the driveway. My legs felt like lead. "He's gone," I said. "He tried to use me, just like you said." George nodded. "He didn't say I told you so. He didn't offer advice." "He showed you who he is," George said, his voice low and rumbling like distant thunder. "Believe him." Martha came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. She saw us standing there. She saw the devastation in my posture. "I choose you," I told them. My voice cracked. "I choose this family. I'm done waiting for him." Martha walked down the steps. She didn't say a word. She just opened her arms. I stepped into the embrace. I smelled flour and soap and safety. I had lost a son, but for the first time in years I wasn't an orphan. 5 years is a long time in the life of a structure. It's enough time for concrete to fully cure. It's enough time for a sapling to take root. They were quiet years. The silence from Chicago was absolute. No birthday texts. No Father's Day cards. No late-night calls apologizing or demanding. Brad had kept his word. To him, I was dead. And in a way, the old Arthur was dead. The man who sat by the phone, desperate for crumbs of affection, had ceased to exist. I built a new life, brick by brick. I spent every Christmas with the Higgins family. I was Uncle Arthur to Leo, who was now 6 years old and drawing pictures of me standing next to George. I helped George rebuild his deck. I helped Martha with her garden. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was part of the load-bearing wall of their family. My health returned. Dr. Evans took the cuff off my arm during a routine checkup, 3 years in. He looked at the chart, then at me. 1118 over 76, he said, tapping the paper. Whatever you're doing, Arthur, don't stop. I stopped carrying dead weight, I told him. He smiled. That'll do it. I was happy. Truly, deeply happy. The kind of happiness that doesn't need to be announced, just felt. It was a quiet hum in the background of my days. Then came the invitation. Seattle. My daughter Sarah was getting married. She had found a good man, an architect named David. It felt fitting. I built the structures. He designed them. The wedding was a destination event, a sleek glass-walled venue overlooking the Puget Sound. Gray skies, green water, and the smell of rain and expensive perfume. I flew out with Martha and George. They insisted on coming. We're family, Martha had said, packing her best floral dress. We don't miss weddings. The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the front row, the polished wood of the pew cool beneath my hand. To my right sat Martha, dabbing her eyes. To her right, George, looking uncomfortable but stoic in a suit that spanned his massive shoulders. I watched Sarah walk down the aisle. She looked radiant, her dress flowing like water. She looked at me and smiled, a genuine, loving smile. I wasn't the lonely old man in the back. I was the patriarch, surrounded by people who chose to be there. The reception was held in a ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. Jazz music floated through the air, mixing with the clinking of champagne flutes. I was laughing at something George said, a glass of Pinot Noir in my hand. Sarah appeared at my elbow. The smile on her face was tight. Dad, she said, can I steal you for a second? I looked at her. The engineer in me noticed the tension immediately. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her bouquet. Of course. We walked to a quiet corner, away from the jazz band. The rain was lashing against the glass now, blurring the lights of the city outside. What's wrong? I asked. Cold feet? No, she said. She took a deep breath. Dad, I have to tell you something. I didn't want to tell you before the ceremony because I didn't want to upset you. My stomach dropped. The old reflex. Disaster incoming. What is it? I invited Brad. The name hit me like a sudden drop in cabin pressure. I froze. I stared at her. You what? He's here, she said, her voice rushing. He's at the hotel. Why? I whispered. The peace of the last 5 years flickered. The fortress walls trembled. Does he know? Does he know about Martha? About George? No, Sarah said. Her eyes flashed with a fierce protective light. He thinks you're alone, Dad. He thinks you're still the sad, lonely man he walked out on 5 years ago. Then why invite him? Why bring that poison here? Sarah reached out and took my hands. Her grip was strong. Because I wanted him to see, she said. See what? I wanted him to see what he threw away, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. He thinks he punished you, Dad. He thinks he broke you. I wanted him to walk into this room and see that you didn't break. She looked over at the table where George was laughing, where Martha was holding court with the guests. I wanted him to see that you replaced him with people who actually love you. I looked at my daughter. She wasn't just a bride today. She was a defender. She had set a stage, not for a reunion, but for a revelation. He's coming to the reception, she said. He'll be here any minute. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Okay, I said, straightening my tuxedo jacket. I checked my cufflinks. I adjusted my tie. The fear was there, yes, but something else was there too. Curiosity. I looked at the reflection in the dark window. I saw a man standing tall. A man with friends. A man with a life. Let him come, I said. Let him see. I walked back to the table. I sat down next to George. Everything all right? George asked, sensing the shift in my mood. Brad is coming, I said. George stopped chewing. He put his fork down slowly. He looked at the entrance, his eyes narrowing into slits. Do you want me to handle it? George asked. His voice was a low rumble. No, I said. I took a sip of wine. My hand was steady. I need to do this. The jazz band struck up a new song. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. A draft of cold air seemed to sweep through the room. And there he was. The reception was a fortress of light against the Seattle rain. Inside the ballroom, the air was warm, scented with expensive lilies and roasted duck. The jazz band was playing a slow, smoky rendition of At Last. I was on the dance floor. My hand rested on Martha's shoulder. My hand rested on Martha's shoulder. She was laughing at something I'd whispered. her eyes crinkling at the corners. To my left, at our table, George was leaning back in his chair, a glass of dark ale in his hand, roaring with laughter at a joke Mike had just told. We were a tight circle. A structural unit, impenetrable. I felt a vibration in the floorboards before I saw him. The heavy double doors at the entrance swung open, letting in a gust of damp, cold air that cut through the perfume and the warmth. I turned. Brad stood there. He looked like a ghost who had walked out of a grave and realized he had forgotten how to live. He was wet. The rain had plastered his hair to his skull, highlighting the receding hairline and the gray that had overtaken the brown. His suit was ill-fitting, cheap polyester that shone under the ballroom lights. It was too big in the shoulders, too short in the cuffs. He stood on the threshold, dripping water onto the polished marble floor. He wasn't looking for the bride. He wasn't looking for the groom. He was scanning the room for a victim. His eyes locked onto me. I saw the moment of recognition hit him like a physical blow. He saw his father, not the broken, lonely old man he had envisioned, but a man in a tailored tuxedo, dancing. He saw the hand on Martha's shoulder. He saw George raising a glass to me. He saw the one thing he never expected to see. Life. The arrogance drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, a silent gasp of shock. He had come to deliver a pardon to a prisoner, only to find the cell empty and the prisoner crowned king. I stopped dancing. "Arthur?" Martha asked, feeling my arm tense. "I'll be right back," I whispered. My voice was calm, but my heart was hammering a warning rhythm against my ribs. "Battle stations," the engineer and me signaled. "Breach at the main entrance." I let go of Martha. I walked across the dance floor. The music seemed to fade into a dull hum. The laughter of the guests turned into white noise. The room narrowed down to a tunnel. Just me and him. Two ghosts facing each other across a chasm of 5 years. I stopped 3 feet away from him. I could smell him now. Stale cigarettes, wet wool, the metallic tang of adrenaline. "Hello, Brad," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't crack. It didn't waver. It was the voice of a man who knew his own dimensions. He stared at me. Then his eyes darted over my shoulder to the dance floor, to Martha, to George. "Who are they?" he asked. His voice was trembling, a mix of confusion and rising panic. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who was behind me. "That's my family," I said. Simple, true, irrefutable. Brad flinched. "Family," he spat the word out, venom mixed with tears. "You replaced us. You replaced your own son with them." "No," I said. "I didn't replace anyone." I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I just stopped waiting at a closed door. Brad, you told me I was dead to you. Remember? Thanksgiving, the kitchen. You don't exist." He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "So I built a life where I was alive," I continued. "You chose the money over the relationship. I chose peace." Brad looked past me again. He looked at Sarah, radiant in her white dress, dancing with her husband. He looked at the table where the Higgins clan sat, a solid wall of support. He looked back at me. The anger in his eyes dissolved. The facade crumbled. What was left was terrified. I need help, Dad," he whispered. The voice was the same as it was 5 years ago. The same pitch. The same desperation. "Elias found me," he said, the words rushing out in a panic. "I'm in trouble again. Worse this time. I have nowhere to go. Jessica left. The house is gone." He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling. "They're going to hurt me, Dad. I need a place to stay. I need resources. I'll need resources. I'll need Fredger the Ford mints. Dalt out that companion. And me God, what you'll see? The Wells, I'm Trestaki, no. The Banley's father. Resources. Resources. Not a father. Resources." I looked at his outstretched hand. For a split second, the old reflex kicked in. The instinct to pull out the checkbook. The instinct to patch the hole. To shore up the wall. To save the structure from collapsing. "He's your son," a voice whispered. "Save him." But then I looked over my shoulder. I saw George watching us, his body tensed, ready to intervene. I saw Martha's worried eyes. I saw the life I had built. If I let him in now, he wouldn't just take my money. He would bring the rot with him. He would bring the chaos, the lies, the leather jackets, the fear. He would infect the sanctuary I had built with the Higgins. I looked back at Brad. "No," I said, the word hung in the air between us. He looked at me stunned. "What?" "I can't help you, Brad," I said. "Not with money, not with a place to stay." "But I'm your son, and you need to fix your own life," I said. "I can't carry you anymore," I said. "Not with money, not with a place to stay. But I'm your son, and you need to fix your own life," I said. "I can't carry you anymore. The foundation can't take the weight." I pointed toward the door. "Go get help, real help, but not from my bank account." "Dad, I have a family to get back to," I said. I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every muscle in my body screamed to turn around, to grab him, to fix it. But I forced my legs to move. Step, step, step. I walked away from the wreckage. Behind me there was silence, then the sound of a heavy door opening, the rush of wind, and the heavy thud of the door closing. He was gone. He had walked out of the wedding. He had walked out of my life. And this time I didn't watch him go. I didn't turn around. I didn't look through the glass to see if his car was still there. I walked back toward the music. My heart was beating fast, a rapid rhythmic thumping against my ribs. But it wasn't the erratic flutter of panic. It was the exertion of heavy lifting. I had just moved the heaviest debris of my life, and now my hands were empty. I reached the edge of the dance floor. The warmth of the room hit me, a stark contrast to the chill Brad had brought in with him. Martha was the first to see me. She stopped clapping along to the music. She stood up, her eyes searching my face, scanning for cracks in the facade. "You okay?" she asked. Her voice was low, cutting through the jazz. I took a breath. I tested the structure. I looked for the grief, the regret, the overwhelming urge to run after him. I found nothing but a strange, quiet stillness. "I'm better than okay," I said, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to convince myself. "I'm done." George looked up from his ale. He didn't ask what happened. He just nodded, a slow, solemn dip of his chin. He pushed a chair out with his foot. "Sit down, Arthur," he rumbled. "Your wine is getting warm." I sat. The circle closed around me. The twist wasn't that Brad had returned. The twist was that he had miscalculated the variables. He had walked into that ballroom relying on an old blueprint. He thought he was coming back to the Arthur of 5 years ago, the lonely, desperate man who would bankrupt himself for a holiday phone call. He thought my silence was a sign of weakness, a void waiting to be filled. He didn't know that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's concrete, curing. He didn't know that Sarah had invited him not to reconcile us, but to show him the renovation. She wanted him to see that I wasn't a teardown project anymore. I took a sip of the wine. It was still cool. I looked at Sarah, spinning on the dance floor. I looked at Martha, stealing a piece of bread from George's plate. I realized then that family isn't defined by whose blood runs in your veins. It isn't defined by obligation or guilt. Family is the people who spot the rot in the fence and help you fix it. Family is the people who hold your hand in a diner when you can't stop crying. Family is the people who choose you, not because they need a loan, but because they want your company. I had found my family, and for the first time in my life, the foundation was solid rock. 2 weeks later, Sunday, we were back in Denver. The wedding was a memory, preserved in photos and the fading scent of lilies. I was in the Higgins kitchen. The smell of roast beef and onions filled the air. The perfume of Sunday. I was sitting at the table, reading the paper. Leo, now 6, was sprawled on the floor with a box of crayons. He was humming a song, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Uncle Arthur," he shouted, scrambling up. "Look!" He shoved a piece of construction paper into my hands. It was a drawing. Crude, colorful, and perfect. There was a giant blue blob, George. A purple blob with flowers, Martha. A small red squiggle, Leo. And a tall brown stick figure. "That's you," Leo said, pointing a sticky finger at the brown figure. I looked closer. The figure had a flat line for a body. But the face had a massive U-shaped curve. "You're smiling," Leo explained, as if I missed the point. I stared at the drawing. I looked at the crude crayon smile. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark oven door across the room. "Yes, Leo," I whispered. I reached out and ruffled his hair. "I am smiling." I stood up. I walked to the refrigerator. I took down a magnet, a plastic slice of pizza, and pinned the drawing right in the center, next to the photo of Sarah's wedding and the schedule for George's truck maintenance. As I adjusted the magnet, my phone sat on the counter. It was silent. No texts, no missed calls, no demands. For years that silence had felt like a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. It had felt like a judgment, but now I looked at the black screen. The silence was peaceful. It was the sound of a house that was safe. It was the sound of a life that belonged to me. I didn't care if it ever rang again. I turned my back on the phone. "George," I called out, walking toward the living room. "Pass the potatoes. I'm starving." Arthur found that the strongest foundations aren't always the ones we're born into, but the ones we build when the rain finally stops. If you felt the weight of his choice and the peace he finally found, please take a moment to like and subscribe. We're building a home here for stories that are real, raw, and built to last. And we'd be honored to have you as part of our family. Thank you for listening.